What inspired you to join the Special Forces Regiment, Grant?
So I went to the Citadel as a cadet, and
Awesome.
so it wasn't awesome at first, but I remember when I was a freshman, one of the I would say top senior cadets that I knew. I mean, I really respected this guy. He was fit, he was smart. He was always talking about as soon as he graduated, he was going to enlist in the Army and go be an 18 Delta medic. And he wanted to be a Special Forces medic. And I always thought, wow, because most Citadel guys that I knew that went through, the commissioning program would come out as officers. And this guy wanted to be a Special Forces medic so bad, he wasn't interested in the officer route. And I always thought, this is one of the better cadets that I know, and he's going to go be a Special Forces medic. And so in my mind, I was thinking, there's no way I could be a Special Forces anything, because this guy's like way better than me in so many areas, and he just wants to be a medic. Now at the time, I didn't know what a Special Forces medic did. But I just assumed that, wow, that's the standard for SF. But I was always intrigued since then, and every now and then I hear something about Special Forces, and then one day I found out that 20th Special Forces Group was looking for people, and I was commissioned as a reserve officer, and so when I heard that they were looking for people, I thought I remembered that one guy, and I thought, well, let's see if I can make it. Who knows?
2 follow-up questions there, Grant. What year was it? I think is the Citadel, is it your rat year, your freshman year? Is that what they call it?
They call it knob. Rat PMI.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Your knob year. What year was your knob year? And was that the first year that you'd heard of Special Forces as an organization?
Yeah, that was 89. And so, yeah, I'd never, I'd heard of the Green Berets. And so, but he was talking a lot more specific than something that I, kind of associated with John Wayne in Vietnam. And
right.
Of course, in my mind, I was thinking those guys were just elite warriors and something maybe I could see in the movies or hear about. But here I was talking to a guy who actually had a plan to go in. So yeah, that was really the first time I kind of heard about it in a realistic sense.
Okay. And so you graduate from the Citadel, you're a reserve officer. When do you start thinking about selection, and how was the process for you in terms of getting to selection as an officer? Whereas not many people know there's an application process, and you don't usually get guaranteed a slot as an officer. Your
Right.
packet has to be accepted.
Right. Now, I had a little bit of a weird route. After the Citadel, I joined a brokerage firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. And so I was selling stocks, penny stocks. If you think of Wolf of Wall Street, it was everything except the hookers and the blow.
Okay.
But it was crazy, and I learned a lot. But so the company I was working for actually went bankrupt, and
okay.
The CEO skipped town. He was working out of Wall Street. And there was, we were part of a lawsuit, and anyway,
wow.
So we weren't getting paid for about a month, and then another company bought us out. And so through all of that, I heard that a buddy of mine was working. He was part of 20th Special Forces Group, and he was a broker. And he said, "Hey, you should maybe quit that firm if you don't have anything to do, and go to selection through 20th Special Forces Group, because we're looking for people. And you were an athlete. I played soccer in college, and you said you were an athlete, and you're relatively smart. You could probably get through." And so, once the second company went bankrupt, I joined 20th Group, and
wow,
and they had a selection process that I went through, and then went to selection. And while I was in selection, actually, a couple of guys told me that, hey, if you pass the Q course and want to go active, that they're actually hurting for officers as well as NCOs. So you might think of going active. And so I didn't really think about going active probably until the later part of the Q course. And I'd had so much fun, especially in Rob and Sage, that I thought, maybe this would be a great thing to do.
Lucky for the active duty groups. So you were right, not the normal path
Right,
by,
right.
by any means. Can we unpack the selection and Q course phases a bit? I know the National Guard has one of the highest selection rates for candidates. So did you feel prepared? How was selection for you, and what year or time frame was that?
So that would have been 96. I joined 20th group, and they explained to me, hey, you guys, a lot of you guys haven't been doing the infantry stuff for a while, or at least not the same as the active duty guys. So we're going to send you through a preparatory course, and you have to pass our preparatory course. We're not going to send you to selection, just so you can fail. And so the preparatory course at the time was 4 weekends, 1 week in a month, so over 4 months. And they would basically come in on a Friday, you would do some kind of PT test, and then some kind of land navigation or long range movement that night, come back, a few hours of sleep. And it was kind of mimicking selection. And usually on Sunday, we were doing some kind of team event. And between that, a lot of land nav, a lot of rucking,
Right.
and that kind of stuff, rope climbing, obstacle course stuff. And so, yeah, by the end of that, I felt like they had pretty much had us go through and pass what we would have to do at selection.
Outstanding.
So I did feel prepared. I thought that was pretty good program.
So you made it through selection, no major issues. How was the Q course for you? And the alpha phase, I ended up going through the alpha phase, many years later. How was the alpha phase in the late 90s for you?
So actually, real quick on selection, I did have a problem with selection.
Oh, okay.
So I got all the way through selection, and then the last team event for me was the ammo crate carry.
Okay.
And actually, it was the second last because I think we had the Jeep push after that. But anyway, we were doing the ammo crate carries, and I was the team leader for that event. And so, I was trying to do the land nav, trying to motivate everybody, trying to carry the ammo crates. And at one point, I don't think I'd been hydrating. So at one point, I went down, and I kind of blacked out a little bit because I remember looking up at the cadre at one point and not really I didn't remember falling down. And the cadre said, "Do you want to quit, candidate?" And I said,
Oof.
"Why do I want to quit?" Like, I didn't understand. Oh, why am I on the ground? That kind of thing. And I said, "Why would I want to quit?" And he said, "Well, that's the right answer, but I'm still going to take your core temperature." So the next thing I knew, I was back at the med bay, and I had ketosis or whatever it's called, ketones in my urine.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I was med dropped and couldn't continue. So then I came back to selection in 97 and passed that time. And it was funny because on the second to last event, I got the ammo crate carry, and I was put in charge of it again. And I was like, oh,
full circle.
But yeah, I passed that one. And then I go to the Q course as an officer, not having ever been in a unit. So we know I went to infantry officer basic course back in 93, 94, and really hadn't done a lot infantry kind of stuff and hadn't been in a unit. And so first lieutenant. And so for a lieutenant, infantry first lieutenant should know a lot about the infantry. And so I struggled at small unit tactics. Got to repeat that one. And that was good because then, by the time I went through that twice, I had caught back up with my peers, I think, at least on the squad and platoon level stuff that I should have known as an infantry lieutenant. And then the MOS phase was kind of tough because all the officers had been through the advanced course. I had not been through the advanced course. So when they said DMP, I didn't know what they're talking about.
Oh, wow.
The first day the instructor said, use your IPB to drive your MDMP. And I said, I don't even know what any of that means. So a steep learning curve. I applied myself. We actually had a study group of National Guard officers, and we kind of got at it, and amazingly got through the MOS phase. Probably because a lot of my peers, kind of did that helping each other out on the off-duty hours and studying. And then we went out to Robin Sage, and Robin Sage was a challenge. But we got through it. I had a pretty strong team. I actually had a National Guard guy on the team who was a butcher in real life. And so when we got the 2 pigs in the G base, man, we ate good.
Good for you guys.
And we ate that whole pig. Murder to the tutor. But Robin Sage really, I think, solidified the idea that I want to do this, because it was, the instructors challenged us. It was hard, but I mean, we were all over Pineland,
right,
doing what I'd never done, you know, in the regular Army, and just all over the place. And it came out of that. Just, I thought, man, this is a place I'd like to be at. So
how was graduation for you after doing all of that training, going up all those extremely steep learning curves, finally walking across the stage, getting your beret?
It was surreal, because, you know, I still had that idea that these guys are elite, and I'm not really sure that I qualify. You know, maybe I fooled some people, but yeah, it was surreal. And, you know, my dad was a Vietnam vet, and he knew SF guys that had been in Vietnam, and you know, actually knew some of the G chiefs that were out there from Vietnam. And just to be involved in that and think, man, I'm in this company. Just very surreal. I don't know.
I bet. I have to ask this other follow-up question. So your 18 Delta senior, from the time you were at the Citadel, had you kept in contact through this period? Was he already in? Did he make it?
No. This was the I guess the era back before social media, and like, you lost contact with people, and I think he might have gone to 10th group, but don't know if he stayed in or got out or went to one of the smooths, or totally
okay.
Didn't stay in contact. And with the Citadel, you know, you come back for reunions with your year, so
that's right.
You never really see the guys that were seniors, and or juniors or sophomores very much. So yeah, I need to look him up.
Yeah, maybe that Special Forces Team Room app will
right.
with that. Maybe that'll be a way.
Right.
So you have a big decision to make. Your sponsoring unit was 20th group, but you had this active option that's open for you. What did you end up choosing, and what went into that thought process?
So I remember there was a guy that was a National Guard officer in selection, and he had first mentioned, he said, hey, if you want to go active, I've heard that they're hurting for both officers and NCOs, so you know, they're encouraging people to put in a packet if they want to. And so it just kind of stayed with me, and then like I said, once Robin Sage was over, I thought, you know, I really don't want to go to DC and be a, you know, chained to a desk or something, or worry about coffee, or go back into the brokerage business and worry about coffee and sales. So I talked to the battalion commander, a guy by the name of Manny Deemer, the battalion commander of the Special Forces, first Special Warfare Training Group's first battalion, and he said, yeah, you know, I looked at your file, you're good enough for active duty. And he signed a letter of recommendation for me and encouraged me to do it. And then talked to a couple other officers that I knew, and they signed letters of recommendation, and I put the packet in. So I finished about 2000, I think. And put the packet in, and I think it was like the end of 99. So I think I finished SEER school in the fall of 99, put the packet in probably November, December 99. And then a year later it was approved.
Year later. Wow.
Right. So in the meantime, I went to all the stuff that I was supposed to go through, you know, like all my other peers. So I went to Ranger School after that. And then I went to the Infantry Captain's Career Course.
Okay.
And then January 2001, I got orders to report to 7th Special Forces Group.
So it's and 7th was at Bragg at
Yep.
that time. So you're fully branch qualified. You get to 7th group. How was that? You said January 2001.
January 2000.
Nobody had any idea the world was going to change. Can you take us through, step by step, that first few years there?
Yeah, so I get to seventh group. My Spanish had been rusty in the Q course, and I've been a little while before since I was in the Q course. So I get to seventh group. I'm assuming that they're going to like start talking to me in Spanish, and they're going to be like, you can't be on a team because you can't even speak Spanish. But they were short officers, they were short NCOs. So I went right to a team. The group sent me down to first battalion sent me to Charlie Company. So at the time, the ODAs were three numbers, not the four. So I was signed to ODA 733, which I think would be 7133 nowadays. But 733, walked into the team room. The company commander didn't even have time to say hi to me. He just kind of said, I don't even think he said anything to me. I went right to the team room, walked into the team room, and they were all glad to have a captain because they were about to do some training and prepare for deployment and down to South America and actually Central America, Honduras. And so they were asking me, hey, we don't have any intel on you. What's your background? Where did you do your platoon time? What units were you in? And I said, well, I was in 20th group. And they said, oh, okay. Well, where'd you do your platoon time? I said, I didn't do any platoon time.
Wow.
So for a little while, it was funny because they didn't believe me. Like they thought I was lying to them. Because they'd heard of SF babies in Vietnam. I was an SF baby as an officer.
Right.
So actually the team sergeant, he was a Chilean American, awesome guy, Manny Tatis. He pulled me aside and said, hey, sir, you're actually probably easier to work with because you are going to listen to me and you're going to learn a lot, maybe even quicker than the average, captain that comes in here and thinks he knows a lot of stuff.
Right.
We got to kind of have a struggle there of me helping him learn what he needs to learn. So in one sense, I think he was right because I was in learning mode. Like I totally relied on that team sergeant to help me get up to speed and quickly. And he likened it to guys that know how to shoot, but have picked up bad habits. And then you got to untrain those bad habits. He said, you don't have the bad habits that some of these officers might have. So it was a mixed bag because I did have to learn a lot of the Army stuff that a lot of
other people would have known.
Yeah.
But so. Blank slate as a leader, which is incredible. What type of team was 733?
So 733 was they called it an A-mount team. So we were supposed to be urban terrain kind of guys. So we always laughed and said we were a ruck team. So nothing special with our infills, but we had to learn how to drive SUVs and
oh, interesting.
Maneuver around, in vehicles. And so most of our mission train ups were things like, hey, we're ordered to go into the embassy and get some people and get them to the airport. And that was kind of our standard thing. So, it was SUV, it was driving, it was doing analysis of urban layouts and how to go in and out of urban areas. And a lot of shooting. We were doing shoot house. We were doing Cephalic type training before Cephalic was a program.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which is kind of cool because then Cephalic came along and our team was pretty prepped up for that. So it's kind of lucky, but
that's outstanding. And so first trip is for your team is to Honduras. Were you able to get in on that trip? And then how was your team leader time afterwards?
Yeah, so we went to Honduras and that late summer. That was really eye-opening. We were working with the Honduran airborne guys, and they'd given us so many these paratroopers that everybody had to train a platoon. I had a platoon, and I'm out there with my rusty Spanish, and looking back, the team sergeant was smart because that's the way you learn, right? You
absolutely
just go home to the wolves and get them practicing their Spanish. And so, I kind of struggle with, telling them that the ambush is going to be tomorrow. I used the word ayer. I didn't mean to use ayer, but I was trying to say over there. And but we kind of got through it all, and I shared my red man with the my red man chewing tobacco with the candidates who I think were used to chewing maybe coca leaf or something, and so they were swallowing the
Ooh.
stuff and getting sick, and so that was fun. and we got to we got to jump with them. And myself and the team sergeant and the intel sergeant, we all stayed behind and trained the guys because not enough of our team members had international wings. And the team sergeant said, "Hey, we'll get a chance later," which we did. But so the whole team went and jumped, and we were out there, just me and the team sergeant and the intel sergeant, with these guys. And it was a great learning experience. I improved my Spanish, sweated a ton. It was summer in Honduras. And we flew back in. We got on a C-130, flew back into Fort Bragg on September 10th.
Wow.
Yeah. So we were allowed to sleep in the next morning because we flew in late. And my wife called me the next morning from work and said, "Hey, get up, turn on the TV." And so yeah, I rushed into Fort Bragg. Of course, you couldn't get on. They kind of closed the gates, and so I pulled over in some restaurant parking lot, Spring Lake. Walked, I don't know how many miles to get the 7th group, thinking we're all getting on a plane and we're going,
Yep.
And we didn't go. 7th group didn't go for a couple of years, but yeah, for about a week or so, we were thinking we were going, and everybody was excited. And then we were told, "Hey, you're going to Bolivia."
So your next trip was to Bolivia.
Bolivia, right? Yeah.
Okay. How was the Bolivia trip?
The Bolivia trip was awesome. So we were the only team in country. When we went to Honduras, we had our whole company. I mean, we weren't close together, but the company was in country. And we didn't really see anybody else while we were there. But when I was in Bolivia, we were the only team in country. There was maybe a couple of PSYOPers, maybe some CA folks, but other than the folks at the embassy and the mill group, there weren't any Army guys, much less SF guys running around. So that was kind of cool because we had a good relationship with the embassy. We got to do a lot of stuff. We kind of broke down into 2-man teams and just dispersed across the country. And so that was really, and myself and the team sergeant would just kind of bounce around and visit different locations and stuff. And so that to me was what I thought was a really quintessential SF type of thing. We got there, we weren't really sure what we were going to do. And after negotiations with the Bolivian counter narcotics police and the embassy, we kind of worked out deals, and we just made it happen to do as much as we could with the guy. We only had 10 folks, 10 guys on the team. So we just tried to do as much as we could with the group that we had. And I think everybody enjoyed the autonomy of being able to go out and just do what you needed to do, and not have somebody, kind of looking over your shoulder or whatever.
Right.
Entire time. So I think for the whole team, they really liked that mission. And we also use it. We assumed, and rightly so, that we were eventually going to go to Afghanistan. So we use it as kind of a train up to Afghanistan. So, as much as we could within the restrictions that we were under, we got out with the DEA, and we got out with the counter drug police, and we did stuff, locked and loaded the weapons, and tried to get ready for a more Afghan style mission than a traditional FID mission where you might be just going out to the range or something like that. So
right. You literally represented U.S. interests abroad. Like, your team was U.S. interests abroad. What an incredible responsibility.
Yeah. And that was, at the time where they were stoning police. The future president of Bolivia was still a representative, a congressional representative at that time, but he didn't think too highly of the U.S. being there, and didn't think too highly of the counter narcotics police. And so we had to work close with other agencies. We had to work close with the Bolivians, and we had to figure out what was going on, because it was not as and to me, that was good prep for Afghanistan too. There was not really a clear understanding of the environment or who we even answered to. So, I was OPCON to SOX South, but I was TACON to the embassy, And then I was ADCON to my battalion commander, who was not even in the country.
Right.
That relationship, we kind of had to, and then even in the embassy, there wasn't a clear agreement on what we were supposed to be doing. And so you had to play, you had to understand the environment really carefully. And my warrant, my intel sergeant, my team sergeant really did a good job of figuring that stuff out and playing the different political angles so that we were able to do our mission, train up for what we thought was coming, which was Afghanistan. And I think all that, man, that, it was probably times 100 in Afghanistan, but that was kind of good prep as well.
So you, just so we can sort of try and timestamp it, you have 2 trips at this point. How were you looking at the remainder of your team time? I assume that the clock was running out a little bit. How was that? And how were you looking at the future as an SF officer?
I just, I kept assuming that we were going to go to Afghanistan, and I wanted to go to Afghanistan. Of course, everybody did. So we get back from Bolivia, and we had laid on a pretty intense training cycle in anticipation of something. Afghanistan was kind of our idea, but we were also being told, hey, you're going to Colombia next. So
okay,
whether it was Colombia or Afghanistan, we wanted to do really good train up. So myself and the team sergeant and the warrant, we planned out this train up, crawl, walk, run. We did a bunch of stuff at Bragg, and then we went down to Florida, and in multiple sites, we were able to do a lot of really good training, whether it was simunitions. We were running down the river in Zodiacs at one point, doing a little bit more urban recon type stuff in Panama City.
Wow.
So we did some, and then we did some live fire stuff as well. And, thinking this is going to hopefully get us prepared for Afghanistan, but even if we go to Colombia, this will be a good training for Colombia. And we ended up going to Colombia. And we were supposed to be in a little town, little base in just south of Bogota called Cibate. But when we got there was no room. Like, they could not put us on the base. And so the embassy said, hey, we'll get you apartments in Bogota, but you're going to have to commute. And so, that was tough, staying in these nice apartments in Parque 93 in Bogota. But we did have to commute, and so we weren't done for the day when we were done training, and we had to put civilian clothes on and figure out how we were getting back, and not every day go the same route and all that kind of stuff. And so that was again, and our train up. Our analysis was that whole scenario that we, let's say we're just sitting around doing some training in Cibate, and we get a call, hey, you need to go to the embassy, get these people, maybe fight through some roadblocks or something, and then take them to the airport. So we did a full mission profile on that scenario, and then that all the training that we did was based on that mission, because we thought that would probably be one of the hardest things that we would have to do. So let's train up for that. And then when we got there, guess what we did on Saturdays and Sundays? We reconned those routes, and
nice.
We said, okay, if we get called to do this, how are we going to do that? And so we were ready to do that if it happened, which again, I think helped us. So my team actually did go to Afghanistan after I finished my 24 months, which oh well, I went to Afghanistan later, but I thought we did a pretty good job of preparing the team for that, because that's kind of a lot of the stuff that we were doing when they did eventually go to Afghanistan.
Absolutely. As you look back, Grant, at what your team was able to do, how highly they were trained, did they finally meet the mark in your mind of an elite fighting force, like what you believed Green Berets were capable of?
I 100% did, going back to the Bolivia mission. So, we finished that mission, and the fact that we spent 3 months, which back then was a long time, and a lot of JSETs were only like 2 months,
right?
But it was a JPAT or whatever mission. So we were there for 3 months, and we had 5 teams of 2 all over that country, and for the most part, not really supervised closely. And we had some instances where I think, politically we were close to potentially, getting in trouble or something. There were political interests that wanted us to work with certain units that weren't vetted by the State Department, for example. There were orders from people that weren't in my chain to do things that I was already doing, to not do things that I was already doing, to not work with certain agencies and that kind of thing. So, having to figure out how to work with certain agencies without anybody really knowing except my official OpCon chain, that was interesting. So the fact that we got through that and nobody got in trouble, nobody got fired, nobody got, hurt or killed or, anything, no UCMJ.
Right.
I really thought, and the team sergeant agreed with me, that was a very successful mission. We are a good team, and it showed later on. I remember the battalion commander telling us, hey, I know you guys probably did some stuff that I didn't want you to do, but you guys are a good team. You guys, I can trust you guys to do stuff. I'm not worried about you guys. The CSM is not worried about your guys. And
right.
Hearing that, and then when they did eventually go to Afghanistan, they were totally thrown a curveball when they got in the country. They were told to do a split team ops, and they did it. They knocked it out. They did split team ops. One team went to the northeast, and the other team was closer to Kabul. I mean, they knocked the mission out and they looked good. So
great to hear. And so as they're doing this, you're moving forward in your career. You leave the team. Did you go to the S3? What was next for you?
So I ignored everything that everyone told me to, when you're 1 year out, you need to start trying to work the angles for your next job and politically maneuver yourself to stay in group. I didn't do that. And so I ended up moving to at the time it was called USSFIC, Army Special Forces Command, but now it's called 1st SF Command. But yeah, going to USSFIC and working at the Southcom desk. So I was a Southcom.
Okay.
But before I left my team, I was able to go to Sephardic. So I got through that training. And so probably about, I want to say 6 months after being over at USSFIC working the Southcom desk, we actually had a captain that it was a Q course buddy of mine. He died in Puerto Rico.
Oh man.
Doing some live fire training, a BB from a Claymore hit him in the head, and so he died. And so I got tagged to go down to Charlie 37 in Puerto Rico, the SIF company, and so that was interesting. Getting another command and being part of the SIF and all that kind of stuff. That was pretty cool. Although they moved from Puerto Rico very quickly back to Bragg, and I ended up getting tagged to come out on the SWIC levy. It was like a gut punch,
right?
But at the time I guess what they had done was they had over recruited captains because we were short, and then after 9/11, a lot of captains were coming in, and I was relatively junior. Compared to a lot of folks. So yeah, they had all these captains that needed teams. And so the plan was to put a captain on every Robin Sage lane as an instructor.
Wow.
So I was part of that levy, and tank commander and the group commander apologized, but they didn't have, they were overruled.
Hands are tied.
And so yeah, I found myself at SWIC. And I was a little jaded because I wanted to be on a team. I didn't want to be at SWIC. I didn't want to play the corporate stuff. I had originally kind of gone in thinking I'd be lucky if I got a team, and then probably after that I probably need to find something else to do. So I ended up getting an email about that time from the force management people who said, "Hey, would you like an MBA up at George Mason civilian clothes for 2 years, and you get an MBA, and then all you need to do is serve at USASOC as a force manager for 2 years, and then you go back to SF." And I thought, oh, that'd be great. So I did that. And when I got to USASOC, 6 months into USASOC, they said, hey, they've civilianized that position, and so you don't need to be there. And I've been doing the weapons program management, so I wasn't even doing force management.
Okay.
Position. I was managing the weapons programs, which is really cool. And they said, hey, you need to either move back to DC, which I just come from, or they said you need to go to the 82nd because they need a force manager. Well, the 82nd was about to go to Afghanistan, and so I said, I'll go to the 82nd. So that's how I got to Afghanistan with the 82nd as a force manager.
Okay.
So I get over to Afghanistan, and the 7th Special Forces Group had just gotten there after I was there for a few months. Third group was there at Bagram at the Siege of Soda. And third group, I ran into some of the guys I knew at third group, and they were leaving, and the 7th group's coming in. And I know all those guys, right?
Right.
And Colonel Reeder was the group commander, and I knew Colonel Reeder. And so General Votel was the DCG ops at the time of the 2nd. And so I kind of had a good relationship with him. And he comes to me one day and he goes, hey, Grant, would you mind moving down to Camp Vance? This was
the SF side of Bagram.
The SF side of Bagram, yeah. And he goes, would you mind moving down there and being our LNO, because we've had a catastrophic loss of rapport with 7th group, and we need you to fix it. And I thought, well, at first I thought, heck yes, I'll go down to freaking Camp Vance.
Right.
So I ran down to Camp Vance. I moved down. I walked into the jock, and so I spent the last half of my year at the Siege of Soda being the LNO between. And long story short, they were 2 lieutenant colonels that had been like platoon leaders together, and now they were the respective 3s of those units.
Oh, wow.
7th group, and they didn't like each other. And so we had an ODA sitting on the tarmac for like 12 hours waiting for air support that wasn't going to get it because these guys had shut off communication between the 82nd and 7th group. So I got with all the majors in the back room and the planners and everything, and we were like, how are we going to fix this? And so we ended up going over to the cab, the 82nd's cab, and saying, hey, we will work with you guys to turn the air back on, but you can't admit it. You can't admit it to anybody. We will let you guys know 96 hours out, which is what they needed to do their planning. But you can't tell anybody that we're doing this because of the egos involved. And so they agreed. And so we got air back on.
Nice.
And things were happening and everybody was happy. And we pretended to not share this information with the 82nd until like 24 hours out, which that's what these guys wanted. So that's what we did. So we fixed the rapport with 7th group. Everybody was happy, and General Votel was happy, and Colonel Reeder was happy. So
what a small world. Two GOs going in different directions, by the way.
Yes. Yeah.
You caught between. And what year was this, Grant?
That was 2007.
Okay.
That was 2007. So yeah, I laugh because I never really did pay the force managers back, and I got to really serve with 7th group, and then Colonel Reeder at the time, Colonel, got me to go to the Commanding General Staff College. So at the time, you had to timing was really important, and they weren't really letting people out of theater unless you had some general sign off on it and everything. And they did the surge, so they were going to keep us there an extra 6 months. And I needed to go to CGSC, and I needed to get back to 7th group as fast as possible so I could KD. And so he helped me do all the stars aligned for me to get back to SF right there.
So you did end up getting back to 7th and CGSC qualified.
So I thought so at the time.
Okay.
So he hooked me up. I went to CGSC, and then a SF colonel, I can't remember his name, Colonel Goebel comes to us and he says, right at the end of CGSC, he goes, guys, I need all you SF guys to go to SAMS, the School of Advanced Military Studies, because we're getting our butts handed to us intellectually down at SOCOM, and we need you guys to be smart. And I thought, you know what? He's exactly right. I'm going to go to SAMS. And I called then General Reeder and told him, what I was going to do. And he said, no, you don't want to do that. You need to get back to 7th group. You're going to ruin your, you never get back to 7th group. You're going to ruin your career. Don't go to SAMS. If the Army wants you to have a master's degree, and I already had a master's degree. I didn't be
right.
George Mason, so I didn't even need that one. But I said, sir, I got to do it. Colonel Goebel. He says, no, screw Colonel Goebel. You need to get back to subgroup. Well, against his advice, I went to Sam's. So I get finished with Sam's. He still helped me get back to seventh group. So I had orders for seventh group. I was a month out from graduating Sam's, and I get a phone call from Branch, and they said, hey, you're not going to seventh group. And I mean, my wife and I had already bought a house at Bragg.
Oh man.
I was feeling good. And I said, well, wait a minute. No, I got General Reader, he's hooked me up. He goes, no, General Reader's only a 1-star, I think at the time. He goes, this guy that there's a 3-star that being argued. And I was like, who? And he goes, I can't tell you. I'm not at liberty to tell you. Well, what happened was the Fort Leavenworth commander had asked the SAMS director for 2 names because he was going to Afghanistan. And I was one of those names. And so I called SF, I called Branch, I called SF command, General Repass tried to fight it. General Mulholland was actually friends with General Caldwell, who was the Leavenworth commander. And he was like, nah, we're not fighting this. This is an honor for an SF guy to be BNR'd like this. And I said, well, that means I'm probably not, I don't know if I'm going back to group now. Tronco didn't care. Nobody cared. Go, you need to go. This is good for SF. So I ended up going to NATO training mission, Afghanistan in Kabul at Camp Eggers with this general to be in his commander's initiatives group, which when I got over there was just a bunch of guys sitting around writing white papers for a year. And so I thought, I can't do that. I'll lose my freaking mind. So I ended up finding this British colonel who was the CJ5. He was mainly not really doing planning, even though he had planners, but advising the Afghan Ministry of Interior and Defense on planning.
Okay. So
that sounds like a SF mission.
Right.
So I talked to him. I said, hey, sir, I want to come to work for you. Please get me out of the SIG. I don't want to write white papers for a year. And he goes, okay, well, we need to do this carefully. We need to wait for the SIG director to go TDY, and then I'll go to the general and I'll already clear it with the chief of staff and we'll get you over here. So sure enough, I got over to the CJ5.
Wow.
This British colonel. And then I ended up getting to work with the CIFSOC because they were being pressured to put SF ODAs with the Afghan civil order police. And so they said, hey, Grant, can you kind of be our go-between for that? And poor, I think it was third group at the time, but poor whatever group was being tasked to do this because they didn't have the manpower to do that. They were already teaming up with a lot of other units, the commandos and all those guys.
Right.
They didn't, and then they were also trying to stand up the local police units, the ALP. They didn't have enough teams to put one team with every Kandak in the civil order police.
Right.
So they tried to do as much as they could, but that allowed me to get out of the wire, to running around with SF guys and SEALs, and with the Afghan civil order police. So when I was in 2007 in Bagram, I only left Bagram to go on leave and then 1 week trip with the general.
Really?
For a whole year, I was on the jock floor, either the 82nd or the Siege of Soda.
Wow.
I almost lost my mind. But when I was in 2010, I was all over the place. I had an interpreter, I had an SUV, and I was either with the civil order police running all over the place, or with the CIFSOC guys or whatever. And I got to go over to the Ministry of Defense a lot, the Ministry of Interior. We were up at ISAF a lot. We were over at the embassy. So I really got a sense of that was the first time I think that I'd gotten a sense of the political level of what was going on. And, I was sitting in meetings where President Obama was telling my commander, hey, I don't think you're making progress with the police. I want you to stop working with the police. And my commander saying, well, we can improve the police, or, well, how are you going to do that? We're going to fix the Afghan civil order police. All right. How long is it going to take? 90 days. And then
90 days.
President Obama saying, okay, Bill, you got 90 days. And then, we cut the communications off, and he looks at us and he says, okay, how are we going to fix the police? We're like, why did you say 90 days, sir? And he goes, well,
right.
Honestly, there's about a sweet spot of about 60 to 90 days where DC loses interest in whatever they were interested in about 90 or 60 to 90 days ago. So hopefully they won't be interested in the police anymore after about 90 days.
Wow.
But seeing all that really gave me a different perspective, because when in 2007, I was just seeing tactical stuff in the 82nd and 7th group. And now I was seeing the political, McChrystal gets fired right in the middle of all that. We were up.
That's right.
We were up at ISAF headquarters. We had spent a week doing the update to the strategy, and we were going to do two-week planning thing. And right in the middle of that, the colonel comes walking in and goes, "McChrystal was just fired, but Petraeus is coming in, so we're no changes." So seeing all that was an eye opener to me. That was really, and I would say that was a lot of SF, infused type of thinking and operations, and trying to figure out what's really going on, trying to build relationships. I mean, I bumped into a 10th group team just walking around Kabul, and I'm like, "What are you guys doing here?" Because 10th group wasn't supposed to be in country, and they said, "Well, we're here under NATO SOF, and so the CIFSOC's not in control of us, and they're mad, and don't tell them you saw us, and we're working with the NBS, and we're not really sure if they're doing legitimate stuff." And I mean, just all that kind of stuff was really eye-opening to me, and introduced me to a whole nother level of stuff I kind of suspected, but it was confirmed.
So not going to 7th group thing actually gave you a totally different set of opportunities.
Yeah, it did. Because if I'd have gone back to 7th, I would have been, probably at the Siege of Soda for a little while, at the group headquarters level. And then I probably would have had a team, probably would have been a battalion 3. So really, more tactical stuff, which it would have been great probably for my career. But I think I learned a ton, not going back to 7th, but yeah, so then I had the KD.
Oh, right.
So by that time, the only thing that General Reeder could get me was SWIC. So I came back, was the support battalion XO at SWIC, and managed to find about $4.6 million that USASOC was hiding from us. It was supposed to go to the armament facility, the JAF, and so I asked them if we could have it. They said yeah. So we gave them a spend plan, and Colonel Ashton Naylor, who's actually here at the convention, he's retired, but he was the training group commander. So he was overjoyed with that. And he said, "Well, what job would you like next?" I said, "Sir, I'd love to command Robin Sage." And he said, you got it.
Oh, incredible.
So I had probably my second best job after team time in SF was Commander Robin Sage. And to me, kind of surreal, because here I am, in charge of the final phase of the Q course, something that, if you would have told me in 1989 that I'd have been doing, I would have thought you were smoking crack or something.
Right. I mean, it's a highly coveted job, right? One of the best jobs, or most of us believe, in SF. And so you come in, you do a left seat, right seat, I assume. What did you want to bring to Robin Sage, if anything, and how was your experience?
The main thing that I wanted to do was try to get the officers, especially, but even the NCOs, to think about their mission in the Pineland, their unconventional warfare mission, differently than just we're going to go in here, we're going to train these guys up, and then lead them to do some sort of part in overthrowing this country, because that's kind of the playbook. That's the road answer kind of thing. And I wanted them to critically think about their sector and how it was probably different than every other sector. And then I also wanted them to think about the politics that were back in DC ongoing.
Right.
The individuals between them and DC. So I would ask them stuff like, do you know personally the Siege of Soda commander? Do you know the CJTF commander? Do you know what his name is? Of course, a lot of that stuff's not in the scenario. So,
right.
So they're RFI. I'm making them RFI the cadre. So I actually I was taking briefs at Robin Sage even when I was at the support battalion. So I built a relationship with some of the cadre. So I kind of worked with some of the cadre, but I wanted them to ask the questions that they would need to ask their next stop was going to be at a group, and they were going to be
Right.
trained up to go on a mission, and they were going to have to be dealing with the personalities of the embassy, the personalities at the SOC, at the TSOC, potentially personalities at group, and all this other stuff. And so I wanted them to start asking those questions now, as opposed to just going through the normal MD&P process where you're just really going off your hires or your 2 levels up, kind of assumptions, and not asking those questions. And so, I would ask them, what's the personality? I'm your battalion commander. Are you asking me, hey, sir, what's the personality of the CJTF commander? Does he hate soft? Because that could be important.
Absolutely.
So that's the thing that I tried to impart to these guys. And it was kind of funny because one of the captains at one point said, hey, sir, you're asking us to think critically. And up until this point in the Q course, we've been told just to regurgitate what we're getting. And I said, noted. However, you're safe with me. And the next step is you're going to have to think critically. So let's start.
Absolutely. And not a moment too soon.
Right.
So you arrive in stage time, you get fully KD'd. I assume you left that job feeling that you'd made a significant change in the regiment, right? You're pushing out the product, the next Green Berets. Where to after something of that magnitude?
Yeah, I didn't really know. After that, I didn't care. I figured I actually did make lieutenant colonel while I was there, so I just figured I'll keep doing fun jobs as long as they're fun. I'll probably get out in 20, and I didn't really. I wasn't planning on what was going to happen afterwards. I kind of wanted to stabilize my family. I'd been at Bragg for the whole time, except for the trips to Afghanistan. So I was cool with just staying at Bragg, and you kind of PCS in between these different commands. So I got a job over at USASOC. They set up a special warfare division, which was kind of a concepts group, and we would just work with SOCOM and the Army on different concepts related to unconventional warfare. And wrote some articles in that time frame that some of them got attention. And so I was tasked to go down to SOCOM or out to Leavenworth or up to DC on different events. And that was all interesting. I really started to view the Army system, and I got really kind of educated on how things get done the right way, and then the more temporary way that will probably disappear once whatever general did that temporary change. So learning how the Army runs and how the institution, it was really interesting because I think a lot of the concepts related to unconventional warfare can be applied to the bureaucracy of our institutions
Without question.
So building networks, figuring out how things get done. I mean, it's the same stuff.
Yep.
Running many insurgencies to try to get around the bureaucracy. So all that was really interesting to me, and so I was happy. And then they got rid of the G3, and I had to be the G3 of SWIC.
Oh wow.
So yeah, I got the good news. And General Wendt was not the easiest general to work for, but he and I actually, we figured out a way to make each other happy, and the chief of staff was very happy because before I came in, they were spending a lot of Friday nights working late, and I figured out how to get his sit rep perfect so that we didn't have to spend Friday nights at work. So everybody was happy with me being the G3 of SWIC. And again, SWIC is a monster. It's a beast, with the center. And I didn't really know a lot about the center and what they do, and the whole backside support, institutional support of the schoolhouse, with
right.
the doctrine and the training and all that kind of stuff. And just little things like if you don't get your ATAR's input correctly, you're not going to run a class. I mean, we had one lady who was part-time, who, if she got sick or died or something or quit, we would be hurting to fill classes. and
wow.
And I didn't even know that. And so just stuff like that was really interesting to learn. And then I got the opportunity to go to get my PhD at NC State. The SOCOM had a program, and so I got accepted. And about a month before I was supposed to start, they told me Congress said we couldn't spend P11 money on PhDs anymore.
Oh
So,
no.
So I didn't even have a job because I thought I was going to be at NC State for 2 years. And so I went to USASOC, the G5. I knew him. He was, I think he was a PSYOP officer. And I said, hey, can I come to work for you and go to NC State part-time, like twice a week in the afternoons? He goes, oh yeah, sure. So I did that. Worked at USASOC G5. And again, another exposure to new and interesting things, how the TSOCs run, how the GCCs do their planning and all this kind of stuff, and
Right.
how USASOC operates. And then I was working on my PhD part-time, and figured I would, I was coming up on 20, and I would hopefully finish my PhD or be close to it, and I'd get out. And then Branch called and said, hey man, you're going to Fort Drum for 2 years. And I said, well, my family's not moving. And this was my 19th year. I remember my 20th year. I was like, oh, really? They knew I couldn't get out, right? So I said, can you send me to Iraq? Because I only want to go somewhere for a year. I don't want to go somewhere 2 years because my family's not coming. They said, well, can't send you to Iraq. How about Korea? I said, all right, I'll go to Korea. So I go to Korea.
What year is this, Grant?
This is 2017.
Okay.
And so I said, yeah, I'll go to Korea. So I went to Korea, took a little break from NC State. I get over there, and the SF, so every division had an SF lieutenant colonel and a major as their LNOs, soft LNOs. And so I get to 2ID, and the guy before me, the SF guy before me, had been put in charge of moving the division headquarters from Camp Red Cloud to Camp Humphreys, south of Seoul. And so I was like, well, that's cool, because I'm not working at the headquarters. I'm on my own. I'm at Camp Humphreys. I got a good team of Koreans and Americans, because 2ID is a combined division.
Right.
We had Koreans, we had Americans, we were doing great stuff. The DCG of support was Tom Drew, who was a 160th pilot. So he got along great with me, and it was great, perfect stuff. And then all of a sudden they fired the chief of plans, and they said, hey, you're a Samster, you're the new chief of plans. And I said, well, I don't, this is the CG talk to me. He's like General McKean. He goes, you're the chief of plans. I said, well, sir, I don't know anything about tanks. And he says, well, I just need you, the last guy was kind of toxic. I need you to talk some of my majors off suicide watch. He says, I just need some leadership. They said, they'll take care of planning for the tanks. I said, all right, sir. So I moved up to Camp Red Cloud, north of Seoul, in the bunker, and became the chief of plans for my last 7 months or so in the division. Which my counterpart was a Korean lieutenant colonel who had spent a year in Argentina, a year in Spain. So we were speaking Spanish to each other for a year.
Oh, wow.
We got along great. And so you couldn't have set that up, right?
Right.
I wasn't a first grouper. I didn't know Korean, but ended up my language skills came into play. So
what a crossover.
And then I bump into a 7th group team. I'm like, what are you guys doing here? And they're like, oh, we're on the tip fit. Everybody thinks we're going to war. And President Trump was president at the time. He tweeted out some stuff that made people think we were going to war. And so I knew we weren't going to war because we only had a brigade of tanks. So 2ID wasn't going to war. I was pretty sure the South Koreans and the North Koreans weren't going to war. So, but that was kind of cool running the 7th group team. But being privy to USFK and then 8th Army and then 2ID and then just the Koreans in general, because we had to work with them to find out what their plans were, because we had to fit our plans in with their plans.
Absolutely.
And that was a fun rotation. I'd never been to Korea, so got to learn Korean culture. The food was amazing. The people were great. So almost another SF type style rotation, because I had to build rapport with SOC Corps. SOC Corps was there, and that was supposed to be my job. But I was owned by 2ID. I wasn't attached. I was assigned.
Gotcha.
So I had to be the chief of plans as well, and there were we had Koreans. I had 3 Korean majors, Korean lieutenant colonel, a bunch of Katusas, Korean civilian, and a Korean captain that worked at my
Major
shop.
team.
so it was, all the skills that I had to have for SF. I thought, had to bring to bear there as well. And it was politically sensitive. I mean, we were told we couldn't be seen outside with Koreans because if somebody took a picture or something, then it might cause an international incident at the time because everybody was, on edge. And so,
Right.
but we still had to do our job. So, how do we go to this one Korean tank battalion and visit it, but yet not necessarily be seen outside with Koreans? So
Tough task.
It was a fun trip. It was a fun trip. So I got back from that and I went to SWIC. I figured I'd do one more job and get out. I was the SF proponent for personnel policy within SWIC, the commandant, the SF commandant office. And so that was really interesting because now I'm dealing with, how do we set personnel policy to address things like the ubiquitous shortage of SF NCOs.
Right.
It's never not been a problem. So how do we do that? How do we manage SF officers so that we don't have too many or we don't have too little? And you can't really, if you're doing management by your group, you can't really correct for a bad year. So how do you do that? How do you communicate and do trend analysis for training numbers? And I had to get smart on the recruiting end, the retention end. So that was a really interesting job. And then I figured I had 1 year left on my 2-year assignment. And then I was going to get out, and they got rid of the commandants. And so I was then the proponent, not just the personnel proponent. So I was now in charge of doctrine training as well. So that was a learning curve.
I can only imagine.
And
totally different requirements.
Yeah, and just that just the training piece was tremendous. So that was very interesting. Learned a lot. Learned how SF is managed at the Army level. How to interact with all those different organizations within the Army to have our guys get paid, have our guys get bonuses, how to set policy for language, how all that stuff is determined. That it's, you think it just kind of happens, but there's actually people in there figuring this stuff out, and hopefully it's a good, you won't know the effect for 2 to 3 years, right?
Right.
Oh, we're short 18 echoes in first group. Why? Well, because we didn't figure out that the big .coms, we pull them all and offering them lots of money to stay in Seattle, and those types of things. And so then I was going to get out, and then COVID hit. And so I wasn't really sure if I should get out, and Branch offered me one last job. That was the Warrior Care Program at Bragg. So in charge of the eastern portion of the Warrior Care Program, what used to be called the Care Coalition.
Oh, okay.
And so helping our wounded, ill, and injured folks. And so I was really in charge of Bragg and Campbell, and then all the Guard and reserve units in those states, the eastern portion of the United States. And so it was a great job to go out of, because those guys are doing the Lord's work. I mean, helping not just wounded, ill, and injured, but families as well, vets as well.
Absolutely.
And that encompasses anybody that's ill, not just wounded. I was thinking it was just wounded guys, but if you have an issue, you have an advocate. If you have ever just one day assigned to SOF, regardless of your MOS, you have an advocate for life that can help you if you have a medical issue.
I didn't know that.
And that a lot of people don't know that. And so not only did it feel good working there and trying to get the word out, I spent most of my time just trying to get the word out and visiting units and that kind of thing. But then also on a personal level, they helped square me away with all the medical requirements that I needed to do. Because, most SF guys don't do the right thing. Go into the clinic and get your knee x-rayed, and then go to physical therapy, and then pain management, all that stuff. So, so on a personal level, I was taken care of, but it was, I failed at my mission. I did not get the word out to everybody in SOF. But I tried to increase the word, the knowledge of the Warrior Care Program, and continue to do so. Actually, I've handed out some phone numbers for the Warrior Care Program here.
That's great. And this interview is another example, right? This will be another marketing vector for the program. Right.
And then I retired. I retired 3 weeks ago. So.
Oh, 3 weeks ago. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you. I got my PhD, and then the next week I retired.
Nice. So you did finish at NC State then?
I did finish. It only took me 8 years.
What was your PhD in, and what did you do your dissertation on?
So public administration was the discipline. And so if you can imagine business administration, but for the public sector.
Hmm.
And then my dissertation looked at how organizations learn over time. And I did a case study of Army Doctrine 5.0, the 5.0 series. And I analyzed from the 97 version to 2019. So there were 5 updates.
Wow.
And
Pre, post GWAT.
Yeah. So just to give you an example, 97, the word complexity didn't exist in our doctrine. In 2010, there were like 53 mentions of it. 2019, there's back down to like 2. Just a perfect little, curve there.
Absolutely.
Things were complex in 2010. Not so much anymore.
Full spectrum, high intensity combat coming. Well, so I want to close in 2 parts, Grant. First, thank you so much for taking the time with us to do this interview today. The first part is, as someone who's spent an entire career in Special Forces, are there any unique insights that you like to impart to anyone, from those who are getting ready to selection all the way out to those senior NCOs, senior officers? Really, any insights that you think people should take away that you learned during your career?
Yeah, kind of the insight that I try to impart to the Rob Say students, which is your mission is not simply to do what you've been tasked to do. That's the easy way out. I think as soft professionals, it's incumbent upon us to go that extra step and critically question all of the hidden assumptions behind what we're being told what to do, because our actions have strategic implications. And I always give the Black Hawk Down kind of example. I got to talk to General Garrison not too long ago, and I asked him, the ambassador knew that we weren't supposed to be chasing ID'd. And the Secretary of Defense knew that we weren't supposed to be chasing ID'd. And yeah, it took a little while to get the word to you, but what do you think about the fact that we went on a mission, we lost US lives when the president had said, stop chasing ID, because killing or capturing that guy ain't going to change anything. And he said, well, I didn't see it as my mission to go above and beyond my chain of command. And so, I wasn't there. I'm not going to question him. But what I tell these SF guys is, don't let yourself be the guy who doesn't keep the sensors and the networks open so that when things change, because things can change like that. And if you're oblivious to it because you don't have a relationship, you haven't built a network, you're just waiting for orders, then frankly, we should have just had an infantry platoon in there or an infantry squad instead of you guys. So that's all the things that you learn about UW can be applied to almost probably every situation. And if you don't do those things, then you're not really professional.
100% agree. Very, very deep insight, sir. And then last for you, parting shots. Would you like to add anything on the backside of this interview?
No, I really appreciate the time for this. I've actually done a few interviews with the Leavenworth folks about Afghanistan and some other aspects of my career, and I would say it's kind of a cathartic. It's helpful. This is probably better than me talking to a therapist. So I salute you, and I salute this effort, because the people that I think that you're talking to, you're actually helping them as well. I mean, I feel better right now.
That's great to hear, sir. Happy to help in a small way.